Welcome to another episode of Unapologetically First Gen. Before we jump into today's episodes, we want to thank you for tuning in to Unapologetically First Gen. This is the podcast where two sisters share what it's like to grow up as first-generation immigrants, everything from the hilarious moments to the heartfelt ones. Each week, we'll bring you personal stories, honest conversations, and amazing guest interviews that celebrate the first-gen experience. So if you love laughing, learning, and feeling connected, you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share the podcast with your friends. It helps us grow.
Hi, I'm Lesley, the older one, operations expert, home baker, and mom to 2 kids and a bunny.
And I'm Stacy, the younger one. I'm a former teacher turned copywriter, cat mom, and romantasy enthusiast.
In our first episode, we mentioned being Portuguese, and today we want to talk to you more about that. We're actually Azorean, which is a part of being Portuguese. The Azores are 9 teeny tiny islands in the middle of the Atlantic. The Azores have their own customs, food, accents, and their own government, kind of like Puerto Rico in the US. And as an aside, really fun fact, you can tell which of the 9 islands someone's from based on their accent if you get really good at listening to us. So a little history. A wave of Azoreans came to the U.S. in the 1950s and early 1960s as refugees after a series of volcanic eruptions on the islands devastated things. You'll find pockets of Azoreans throughout New England and parts of California, and you can really see it in fishing and farming towns in cities like Gloucester in Massachusetts. And now we kind of want to tell you a little bit about our family history, just so you can get to know us a little bit better.
I think, too, just noting Azorean immigration, it's not just to the U.S. There's also, the southern parts of Brazil have a lot of Azorean people, and then also Canada has a lot of Azorean people. We kind of spread out. There's definitely way more Azorean people outside of the Azores than there are inside of the Azores.
Yes, there are more cows inside the Azores than there are Azorean people inside the Azores.
That's true. So I think, one of the things that's really cool about the Azores, you were saying that, it does have its own customs, foods, and the accents are different. And I think it's really cool. 7 years ago, we did this trip where we actually visited a bunch of different islands and really just getting to know, the personality of each island and kind of seeing what makes each island its own island. It was really cool to learn more about all of the islands.
Yeah, and what's really cool about going there as a fellow Azorean was that everyone was super excited to share what they loved about their island, and I loved that. I absolutely want to redo that trip in a few years with the kids when they're old enough to really understand what's going on and to help them embrace that part of their culture.
Yes, and now it's a really big touristy place where a lot of hikers go there, and that was something that I noticed when I last went there is the hiking trails are super well marked, and there's a lot of people who are coming in and just walking the islands because they are so beautiful. But it wasn't always like that.
It wasn't.
So if you rewind to when my parents were growing up, so in the 60s, at that time, Portugal was under a fascist regime. So they were dictated by.
Largely ignored by.
So the government was under Salazar, but they were on these islands with extreme poverty. So, at my grandparents' house, there was no running water, there was no indoor plumbing, there was no electricity until much, much later. I always remember my dad talking about the first time they watched TV, and it was they got a TV at a community center, and everybody in the neighborhoods, all the different neighborhoods would come together to watch this TV. And it was on a generator, and they had to make sure the generator had energy so that they could watch a few minutes of TV. And it was he was a teenager at that point. So it was the 70s.
Yeah, I think every kid around our age has a story that their parents have told them about the first time they watched TV. and that you could really mark out the wealthy families from the rest of them by who got a TV and would invite the entire village over to watch TV at their house. It was a community experience.
Oh, yes. And I even remember Grandpa, even though they had running water and plumbing when we would visit them as kids, Grandpa would still use the outhouse. Like, he was just, like, more comfortable using the outhouse. He would go outside.
I remember growing up, when we went there, I remember houses that didn't have indoor plumbing,
Ooh.
which is pretty crazy. So when you went to go visit certain aunts and uncles, you would have to use the outhouse. And that was pretty wild, because we're talking now about the 90s.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, so we're talking about decades after the end of a fascist regime and some people just not having basic necessities. I mean, it's very different now. I don't think you see that anymore, but when we were growing up, it was very much dirt roads, donkey rides, because nobody had money for horses are very expensive.
I actually learned that donkeys are endangered there.
Really?
And, yeah, they're becoming extinct. There's very few donkeys now.
That makes me so sad.
I
They
know.
were such a big part of our childhoods. I remember a lot of motorcycle rides, riding in the back of like pickup trucks.
Totally normal.
Totally normal, totally safe. This was pre-seatbelt laws.
Oh, for sure.
But do you want to talk a little bit more about how Mom and Dad grew up?
Yeah, so some of the stories that stand out to me from Mom and Dad is really like Dad talking about how they would have an egg on their birthday. Like that
But
was
only
like,
if you were lucky enough for the chickens to lay enough eggs.
yeah, and I guess some context to this too is that both of my parents have a lot of siblings. Do you know the right numbers?
I want to say that
It's like 9 and 11 or something.
yeah, it's something like that. 9 siblings and 11 siblings. We can look into that for a future conversation.
But the point is they lived in extreme poverty. There was a lot of kids, and they would go to school until 4th grade because that's as far as school would go. It was like a one-room schoolhouse. Everybody, I'm pretty sure, like had the same curriculum, and then there was like a test at the end, and if you passed the test, you moved on to the next grade, and if you didn't pass the test, you had to repeat the same grade. Other things that stick out besides the birthday egg is, Dad talking about like his shoes and how he would go barefoot to school to not ruin his shoes and then put on his shoes when he got to school.
Yeah, you had church shoes and you had school shoes, and they were worn inside the building and not on the way to and from the building.
To be fair, it is very muddy there sometimes, so I could see your shoes getting messed up real quick.
Yeah, and we're talking about before anything was paved, so
it's true.
It would be really, really messy. You're talking about a climate that's wet most of the year, and it is really sad thinking about, young Dad.
I know.
Going barefoot to and from school or wherever. And other than that, you just didn't really have anything. I know Grandma would make their clothes. It was we're talking about very rural, extreme poverty.
I mean, they grew most of their own food. They either grew it or traded it. It's not like they had like a lot of money. And then like once you finished 4th grade, you started working. So it's like they really didn't have the teenage experience, right? Where they like kind of worked through all of their feelings. They kind of just skipped to adulthood once they hit like 10, 11, 12 years old, and they were working full time. And when we go around the island, our dad will be like, oh, I helped build this road, and I helped do this, and I worked on the vineyards from the time I was 12.
We hear stories about, like, stolen blueberries and things like that, which is really cool. And then our mom was lucky enough as a teenager to get to work in a store because her cousin owned one of the shops in the village, and it was just, like, one shop that you could kind of get everything. Almost think like a general store, but much smaller.
Yeah, because even to this day, the bread guy comes around. Like,
yeah.
Even to this day, you can buy bread at the grocery store, or you can go to, like, the bakery, but the bread guy drives around the island to sell fresh bread. You just go outside and buy your bread.
Yeah, and pro tip, if you are visiting the islands, the bread guy has phenomenal cinnamon rolls. I will tell you, you will be disappointed in every cinnamon roll you have in this country after that.
Yeah, I know.
And I would say our parents actually had it, and I'm putting this in quotes, better than their parents because our grandparents are essentially illiterate,
Yep.
working from very young children.
They probably didn't even go to school at all.
I don't think they went to school. I don't think they could be rented out essentially to other farms if needed. There just wasn't any infrastructure to support families in their time. One of our grandmothers didn't learn how to read until she was in her 50s. And that was a really big thing, communicating back and forth later on when her children were here.
Yeah. And that's so crazy to me to like think about. Reading is such an integral part of my life. I literally make money off of writing. And just to like think of like going your whole life without being able to read and then, you know, being 50 and being like, you know what, like I'm going to do this thing so I can write letters back and forth to my children who have immigrated across the sea. She's so brave.
Yeah, I think about that often. It's definitely what kept me going many times when I was in school and I was balancing working full time and going to school and trying to get my degrees. And I was just like, you know, this woman could learn how to read in her 50s. I can certainly learn how to do statistics in my 30s or, you know, whatever it was that I was learning. You know, that was it was a big source of pride for me that she really went out of her way to do that. And it was a program that was instilled. It was specifically to teach that generation some very basic, like, pieces of education that they were missing.
Yeah, I think we even have one of her notebooks. And you can kind of see, it's so interesting to see. It's something that a first grader would learn, but it's our grown grandma was like going through this whole process of learning to read as a grown up.
Yeah, super proud of her.
I know. She's great. But our parents didn't stay long on the island, only until they were like 20-ish.
Yeah, so they got married in their late teens.
As people did back then.
As was normal. And then Dad went to his required military service. And then essentially when he got back, they borrowed money to fly here and did this incredibly brave thing where they started their lives over in a country that wasn't theirs.
And it's so funny because I look at them and I'm like, they're not like super risk averse people, but I feel like they just put all of their risk into that one big risk.
One risk. And they were like, we are done being risky people.
That was enough for a whole lifetime.
But they were also younger, and I think that when you're a teenager or you're in your young 20s, you're just like, of course this will work out. Like, I think that wait, maybe this won't work out, anxiety doesn't settle in until your brain fully develops.
That's true. I never really thought about the fact that their brain isn't fully developed when they moved here.
Yeah, they were in their young 20s, and, you know, they had just moved here, and then shortly thereafter, they had me. So it was tough.
They waited like several years before they had you, which was very progressive for the time.
They were very progressive people.
Yeah.
I would say they're probably the most progressive of their siblings.
I agree with that. I think probably it also has to do with like where in the country they ended up and the community surrounding us that really helped like instill these values, because I think they have stayed with consistent values throughout, where I think some other people who have kind of moved outside of this like super liberal bubble that we live in don't quite hold on to these same values.
Yeah, I agree with that.
One thing too is something that I think was really hard was that the family got split up, right? So we mentioned like they both have a lot of siblings, and basically there was three groups where one group stayed on the islands, one group immigrated to the US, and one group immigrated to Canada. And so our family is pretty much split up between these three places, and that's why I have like some cousins I don't even know, and it's really hard to keep track of everybody.
So I just did a quick check because I'm the kind of person with spreadsheets for everything. And Dad had 8 siblings and Mom had 13 siblings. But 4 passed, which was super common at the time. And Dad had 8 siblings, 2 passed.
So we had an aunt come over. They brought the rest of the family over. So my parents, I don't know, were they like third to come over? No, they were one of the last ones to come over. That's a good question. We should ask them.
I think they were one of the last because Dad is one of the younger siblings.
Right.
And they came over, the visas that they did were from his side of the family.
My parents always took us back there, so we would go every other summer. We would trade off vacations between going back to the islands and then like renting a beach house
on the Cape.
Yeah.
Which was the most New England thing we could have done.
I
know. Talk about dual cultures.
But yeah, I have all of these memories of like, it was so different going there because as a kid going there, I was able to like go wherever I wanted.
Oh, it was instant freedom.
There was no rules. Like,
you stayed out late. You ate what you wanted.
And here it was just like this vigilance and this fear of like, what's going to happen? We're in a different place. It's not safe here. So it was really like night and day the way we were parented when we were here and the way we were parented when we were there. It's super interesting.
It is. It is really interesting. I think about that sometimes. But it was amazing. It was, we had our grandmothers there and the way it smelled and the fresh bread. And I mean, even to this day, like I bake bread and it like that first bite of warm, fresh out of the oven bread just completely takes me back.
What's like some of your favorite memories of the islands?
I think one of them is just running in the wooded area behind Grandma's house. But also, you know how you used to be able to climb behind the outhouse? You could climb up the hill, and if you got in far enough, then you were on this plateau, and you could watch the cows on the other pasture.
Aww.
And it was this hidden little space, and I liked going there because I was by myself, and the introvert in me loved that.
I love watching the cows.
They're so great. They're just minding their own business, and as long as you don't get near them, they will continue to mind their own business. So that, and then also going to the co-op across from the other grandmother's house and spending essentially all night there helping them make pshkoit, which are these little, for lack of better word, cookies. I loved that, learning how to make the twisty pshkoit. Again, the fresh bread out of the oven. I think nothing beat the bread coming out of the wood brick oven. That was amazing. Really just spending time with the grandmothers. I would always make friends with the animals, which is, anybody who's ever been on a farm knows that's not a good idea. Not a good idea to make friends with the animals. Those animals will not be there at the end of the summer.
I actually remember one time, Grandpa had a pig, and he specifically saved the pig for when we were there so that we could have a big feast. And I was so sad. And I was like, I'm not going to eat this pig. This pig is my friend. And Mom was like, it's a different pig. It's fine. And I'm like 7-year-old me. It's just I guess I can eat this pig.
This pig is okay. I will say not eating meat, I feel like is probably because of hearing a pig scream.
Yeah.
It is really tough.
Though I will say, like, I feel less bad eating meat there because you're watching the cows and they're, like, on these pastures and they just, like, have such a good life that I feel less guilty about eating them because it feels more like a natural part of life than, like, buying meat at the grocery store that's, like, definitely been factory farmed.
Yeah. And I will say, too, that it was very different when you're talking about, you know, like, Grandpa was like, let's save this pig for when they're there. That was really the only meat that they had, and it became a whole village thing. Like, everybody came together to one person's farm and participated in using every single part of a pig, in this case a pig. And I remember that so well growing up, like, you know, using, I mean, and I'm talking everything, like using the skin, using the intestines, it was like nothing went to waste because that was the only meat that you were going to eat for the whole year until the next one. So it was like as preserved as it could be. And at the end of the day, you had this like amazing feast with all of your neighbors and everybody who lived in your part of the village.
And when you ask Mom what are her favorite memories about being a kid, it's those pig feasts.
Yeah, she talks about that. Yeah, she really loved that. It was such a big deal because everybody came together and everybody was a part of this. You know what it is? It's like when you haven't seen your friends for a long time and you guys get together to have dinner and you're like, this was a great day. Like,
yeah,
it's like that, but more because
it's like Christmas.
It is, but it's like Friendsgiving.
Yeah.
Because it's everybody that you love, all of your friends who you haven't had time to see because you're all very busy adults. And suddenly you're like here and you're together and you have the whole day to spend together and you're all working towards one community goal, which is to make sure that no one starves over the winter.
Yeah, at least it doesn't get cold there, so like they are still able to farm during the winter, which I think is probably how they survived.
Agreed. I think there's a lot of also root vegetables that got saved, so a lot of eating like potatoes and carrots and lots of herbs. I think that's one of my
turnips.
Ugh. So many, I know. So many turnips. One of my fond memories too is sitting out on Grandma's balcony because she had this like amazing floral and herb garden and it just smelled so nice there. And I loved when we would sit there and like smell the peas. Mm-hmm. And it just like that smell is so amazing and it's not something you can describe. It's like the peas and the earth, but also this like sort of botanical background because you're sitting out on her balcony near these flowers and also near the mint. And it's this kind of amazing like circus for your nose of scents. And, you know, I think you really get that. This conversation really hones in on like how tied smell is to memory.
It's true. I definitely felt that the last time I was there, which we'll dig into in another episode. But let's kind of wrap up our parents' story. So they came here. When they came here, it wasn't easy at all, really. They were working multiple jobs. They were working factory jobs.
Cleaning offices.
Yep. I always remember them. I always remember Mom having 2 jobs, and then Dad had a job that was like really early in the morning so that he could pick me up from school, and then Mom went to her second job.
Yeah, and when I was little, they both worked at the factory for a long time, basically until that factory went overseas.
Oh, is that what happened to it?
Yeah, it went overseas.
I did not catch that.
And then Mom working at night at actually the Polaroid company. She was a cleaning lady there. And I think she had that job until
she started working in the schools.
Yep, until she started working at the schools.
And that really helped her English. Her mom says she's not good at English, but she's very, very good at English.
She is. She's just, I think with everybody in new languages, you just don't have the confidence.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes, but she is.
So yeah, I think that's pretty much our story.
In a nutshell, I hope everybody enjoyed the kind of chaos of that story. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Unapologetically First Gen. If this episode resonated with you or you have your own first gen stories you'd like to share, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us on Threads or Instagram at Stacy Braga Copy or Rather Be Baking Bread. Don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share the podcast with someone who'd love it. Until next time, keep embracing your roots and making your own path.